I am discovering me. Discovering me. My identity was hidden, taken from me, long before my ancestors began hanging from trees. The serpent, he was the real thief, deceiving my sister Eve. He made me forget I was royalty. My father is a king. I am the daughter of the everlasting, loving, omniscient three. He came to give me life. This world wants to take it away. He never intended for it to be this way. Free will, a blessing and a curse. Say my name. My life matters. God said it first. Discovering me. Redefining my identity. Made fearfully and wonderfully, flaws and all, my destiny was altered when I heard his call. I can't see where I'm going, but I know what I'm leaving behind. My faith is blind, lamps at my feet as I shoulder his load. I feel light, I see life as I walk the Samaritan road. Hello, everyone. This is Nori, and you're listening to the Discovering Me podcast. Today, I am excited because I have three special guests. I have my husband, Jeffrey Williams, and then I also have Tim and Samentheur Blake. So I'll go ahead and let all of them introduce themselves.
What's going on? Jeff, hubby here. Yeah.
I'm Sam.
And I'm Tim. That's
Awesome.
all.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about love. What does it mean? How do you keep love alive in your marriage? And what does that look like in a marriage? So my first question for you guys is, how long have you been married and how did you meet?
We have been married 21 years and we were set up on a blind date.
Oh, that's so cool.
He's gonna correct it because I'm not the date person.
On April 14th, it'll be 21 years.
Oh.
So she's early.
I just figure we're in the year, so it's 21 years.
That works. Jeffrey and I have been married for 5 years and we met in college. You guys know that story.
Oh no, let's get into the details of that story.
Okay, I'll let you start.
It's love at first sight.
This guy.
I was right there with my boy. We were walking on campus. I was like, yo, who that? He didn't know. I was confused because we knew like every Black person on campus. And and he was like, I don't know, man. I was like, all right, I gotta find out. And I chumped out like 4 or 5 times. And then I finally approached her when she was with, common friends and, casually was like, oh, just struck up a conversation. And eventually we started talking, hanging out, and actually another mutual friend of ours is the person who convinced me to like take it to the next level of like talking to her, invite her on her date. So, yeah. And
the rest was history.
Yeah, Jeff literally risked it all for you. He risked it all for you. In any case, well, Sam said our story in the blind date. And we were set up, we both work for our church, and she was in Boston and I was in LA. And a guy who was in the church in LA met her and said, oh, I know somebody. And then when he came back to LA, he's like, oh, he said, hey, I met this girl in Boston. Would you be willing to take her on a date? Now, I did not know him. And since it is Black History Month, we'll just put that part out there. He was white and he saw a young single Black woman in ministry, and he saw a young single Black man in ministry. He goes, they gotta work.
Oh no, he wasn't wrong.
And so I did not listen. I was like, whatever. On the outside, I was like, oh sure, but on the inside, I was like, whatever. And then a couple months later, some skin folk came through and told me about her. And I was like, oh, okay. So I called 2 weeks later, rather. We talked on the phone for a month. This is 2000. So this is May 2000. There's no Facebook. There's no social media. And so we're just emailing and talking. And that's how I started liking her. Actually, she forgot a part of the story in our first conversation.
Well, I was going to share it when he was over, but the very first time he called me and we spoke, I was sitting down in a Shaw's parking lot in was it Rocks? Where was I? I was near UMass Boston. I was sitting in a Shaw's supermarket. My friend went in the supermarket because I got the phone call. When she came out, she goes, "Oh, so what did you think?" And I said, "I'm going to marry that guy."
Aww.
That's the very first time we ever spoke. I just knew from that conversation that I was going to marry him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I love that. Spirit was
So-
so early.
So she flew out to LA a month later. Yeah, a month later. And then as soon as she got off the plane, I was like, oh, that's it. She's the one.
He had a Jeff moment.
I did. Now she was getting off the plane and I had two people waiting with the sign with her email address on it, again, going way back to Hotmail
That
account.
is so funny.
And so I just had to, I waited around the corner because I don't have the ability to hide what I think on my face. And so I was like, if she came out and I was like, oh, bruh, I don't know if I was going to be able to hide it. So I had them out there and then she waited. She did this on purpose. She was the last person off of the plane.
Look, petty, both petty.
She was the last person off the doggone plane. And she came out and I looked around the corner. I was like, oh, I was like, hey.
He didn't want me to mistake the other brother holding the sign for him.
That is so funny.
Exactly. So I popped on out real quick. So we started. Yeah. So we started dating a week. She got there June 4th. We started dating June 10th. She moved 2 months later, and then we got engaged on December 10th and married April 14th the following year. So less than a year from the time we first talked, got married. That's way more than you wanted for your podcast.
No, I love it. I love all of it. I love hearing your story. That's funny. Me and Jeffrey's was a lot longer, obviously. I met him in 2010 and didn't marry him until 2016. He took his time.
Just like fine wine. I just had to met the
Oh my
love.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
The word. He thinks he's so smooth. Anyway, you can ask your question.
If you were real smooth, your first conversation, Nori would have been like, I'm going to marry him. But
you want to know something funny? 6 months after we had started talking, my mom was talking to one of her friends and she goes, oh yeah, I think she's met the one. And I remember looking at her like, I've only known this man for 6 months. What are you talking about? When I first met Jeffrey, I was like, he's a cool friend, but I don't know about anything more than that.
See, I knew that I had to get all the people around her so that she would be like, well, they can't all be wrong, you know?
That's funny.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a really interesting, like, because I don't think I realized that you were on the opposite side of the country from one another. Because that in itself is like, so, because I'm a person who like, I'm so rooted like in like Connecticut, like with my family and stuff, that like I couldn't even see myself like uprooting, like to go, across. And I constantly see, people like, within our churches that like will jump across like, sometimes country lines. Yeah. And that's so interesting. Like, so the big move was for you then, Tim.
It was for me, but I was used to moving. I moved from Boston.
Oh, you moved to LA?
Yeah, I moved to LA. Yeah, Tim didn't move.
How did you guys end up back on this side?
Oh, so we were in paid ministry with the church in LA. In 2003, as our church was maturing, we got laid off, and then we moved to Orlando.
Well, before we got laid off, I actually taught in the inner city for a little bit. I taught middle school in the inner city.
She taught, and anyway, long story short, we ended up in Orlando to be closer to her family, and she got a job there, and so we were planning to put roots there in Orlando. And then after we were there 2.5 years, we got a call to come back and paid ministry here in Connecticut, that's literally 14.5 years ago. So, so actually this year will be 15 years since we've been here.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Sorry.
Didn't think I would ever be back in New England.
I'd never wanted to stay here, but here I am.
Lucky you. All for love. One of the questions, because your love has spanned over decades now. So how has the
That's a good thing.
beautiful thing. That is amazing to be able to have that enrichment, you know? So how, like, from the time, like, because I think our brain works in such interesting like facets. So before she got off the plane, before you talked to each other versus dating, engaged, married, children, how has love evolved, like, throughout that time, throughout like all that experience together, and before to now? How has it changed, in what ways?
That's a great question.
That's a fantastic question. I definitely feel like I love my husband more now than when I first met him and married him. I think it is the going through life together and realizing that you are really down for each other, you know, that just the investment in friendship, the investment in, because there are times in those, as you guys said, decades, it's hard to say it because I only feel 26, but
That's what matters.
yes, that's what matters. But I think it's, you know, going through the loss of a child, going through trying to have a child, not able to have children for a while, going through just job changes and surgeries and, you know, loss of family, having our children and raising them, you know, I think it just, you grow more in love because you get to know each other more. And I think that's a short explanation for me, but it's just, you know, you just really love the person more because you know them. I didn't know Tim when I married Tim.
Right.
You know, just a small glimpse of who he was, but living with him, seeing how he deals with struggles, dealing with, you know, just good and bad habits, and now putting love into practice.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I would say for me, if it were a movie, I would have started in our at our second year of marriage, and when Sam was ready or trying to figure out a way to leave me, and we were
Oh Lord.
we work for the church, and both of us, it's very well possible that both of us had prayers that we'd be fine if the other one died. Now, we didn't pray that in front of each other, but we both have prayed.
Oh my God.
That's real. That's real.
And so if I were to start there, that's where I'd start the movie. Like I would start the movie with me praying, like, God, you could take her. I'm good. Like that's where I would start. And and the reality is similar to, again, if this is to a faith community, if it's a general podcast, we're Christians, and so you know, our relationship is based on our faith in large part. And so you learn as you go, you evolve, you grow, and it's challenging. I think you don't we did not understand. We thought we loved each other, but we did not love each other until we started going through hard times. We did not start practicing love until we got married, because we were both so different and our relationship was so fast. Just because of the context of our jobs and the context or the culture of the church where we were at the time, it was so fast. And when Sam said we didn't know each other, we knew the important things. Like we knew the things, like the character, like, oh, like we had trust, all those things. But the things, like you said, the habits, I didn't understand how important family was. My wife is from the Caribbean. I didn't understand the depth of her culture at all. I don't think she understood how American I am.
Oh Lord, it is an intercultural relationship for real. Like it's no joke.
I believe it.
For years, I said we were interracial. We had an interracial relationship. My wife didn't like that, but our cultures are so different, and and in our own ways, we were both raised privileged. And so so it had an impact. We're both kind of like only children also. And so that
Tim is the youngest child, but he is so far youngest that he's like an only.
I'm like an only child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so there's so much, if I can just real quick, Jeff, I don't know we'll go long, but I got sick. I had a bad fever. This is as an example. I had a really bad fever and I was sick and I was on the couch at our house
in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. And I was
in the room.
She was in the house or the apartment. I went and grabbed Gatorade from 7-Eleven
around the corner,
and I came back and I'm laying on the couch and I'm, and she goes, "Why didn't you ask me to get it?" I'm like, "Why am I gonna ask you to get it? I can just go get it." I was just so independent that I was like, I can do it, any case.
I will say he has no problem now asking me to walk down the walk into the living room to hand a remote.
I'm trained. We're interdependent.
I think he has grown tremendously.
Amen.
I'm trying to grow in that area. I try to practice once in a while too and ask her to get me stuff.
So funny. I don't mind. I think that's really cool though. I think something that you guys said that's really important is like that growing in the interdependence. I think that that's something that it's difficult to teach people. Like you can't really teach someone that. It's something you have to experience. And I definitely think it's important because I feel like a lot of times it's when I see my friends or even when we go through different issues, it's because we're just trying to do things ourselves instead of trying to rely on each other's strengths and weaknesses. And so my question is, if you can, how would you explain that to somebody? How could you teach that to somebody?
Teaching interdependence. Wow. I guess based off of our personal marital experience, I would say that there can be a space where, and I don't know if I am communicating this accurately, but there doesn't need to be like a line of demarcation where one starts and one ends and the other begins. It needs to flow into each other. And what I mean by that is it really starts, part of it is not just the love, right? The love is layered because when you come in, you have love, right? You do, but it is a level. It's a level of love, but it's the friendship. It's the work of the friendship that gets you into the interrelational part, right? That relying on each other, because there's a level of trust that you develop through relationship, through friendship, not through the romantic part.
Right.
Honestly, because there are times in our marriage, and I don't listen. If people tell me they're married and they've never thought this, as you can hear, Tim and I definitely felt like we're in this for life. So if something happened, if God needs to take one, that's what way back when, not anymore. I definitely am not praying that anymore. But in that, as you're developing that interrelational, that friendship, that being able to almost not take everything so personally, but also allowing each other to have relationships outside of each other that you can bring, that comes back to each other. And what I mean by that, Tim having healthy male relationships, myself having healthy female relationships, that there can be a part-time that I am not dependent upon him for everything, for my emotional needs, my friendship needs, my romantic needs. You cannot sustain that.
Right.
I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I think what Sam is saying, the strength of, if I can, the strength of what helps you become more interdependent are some of your outside relationships where you are able to vent and bounce things off of each other. So when you come back together, you're able to come back kind of in your right mind, if that makes sense. And so the distant, in some ways, some level of distance helps your interdependence grow more. And the Bible, again, back to the faith thing, the Bible talks about marriage as becoming one. Right. And the whole thing is, over time, as you grow in depth of love and respect for one another, it's no longer, oh, that's Tim. It's Tim and Sam. It's
Right.
Jeff and Nori. It's you become one. When you asked that question, I thought about like my grandparents were married forever, and my grandmother died in February of whatever 1998. My grandfather died November of 1998.
Wow.
They were so, and you've heard this story, right?
Mhm.
Where couples one doesn't last much longer after the other, and I believe because over time they're so connected, that healthy relationship, they're so connected that when one dies, the other part is there's a lack of will to live to a degree.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, adding to that about the relationships that help foster that, those outer relationships, that those also have to be relationships that both of you trust.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that those are relationships where even in venting, and Tim and I believe this very strongly, I don't think there's anyone who can ever say I speak badly about my husband, not my friends.
I try to do too.
And the same thing with him. I can vent, but even in the venting, there's a measure of respect and love and all of that. And then I can also trust and respect the person and know that I can trust his heart with them.
Right.
Because if that's not there, then it complicates it, and actually it's unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's something that I try to practice in our marriage. Like anytime that we're having an issue, I never make the issue about Jeffrey. I try to focus on the issue. So if I'm talking to even him or a friend about it, I'm not like, he's like this or he's like, I was actually telling one of my friends this recently, is anytime that I speak about him, I try to speak about him in a positive light, even if it is an issue within our marriage. I'm like, Jeffrey's great, but this is what's happening. And I need help, and it's so I like that advice. I think that that's something that I've clinged to in the last 5 years. And I think that that helps us to be able to deal with problems without them taking over everything else.
Yeah.
And definitely like the ideal of like the relationships and the friendships that we have, like being quality. We see the benefit, like immediate benefit. Like I come home after maybe like a long stint of like depression, or like just like not planning well, or whatever the case may be, and not being connected, and I can go into the mindset kind of like of like, oh, I got this, and I'm fine, and like I go into this autopilot state that is a less quality Jeff than the Jeff that Narisha deserves, and she recognizes it. I do not. And then she'll be like, maybe you should make some time, and then I finally do, and I come back refreshed and like feeling more in love with her and just feeling more encouraged. And she's like, you should plan another time. That was great. I'm glad you got time. And you see the difference. At first, when she says that, of course, immediately I'm like, what does she mean? I'm like, oh, nah, I can tell. Yeah, I'm definitely a better person at this moment. and that definitely, speaks volume, like to just understanding the relationship.
So what would you say is the scripture that you guys have clung to in your marriage, or if you have multiple even, because as you said, so this is also a Christian podcast, Tim. I know you weren't sure, but yes.
Tim is going to have to give me the verse, but it's those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed.
Proverbs 11:25. A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. It's a NIV. Yeah.
And I think it's just honestly the reason why I remember that, because Tim used to say it all the time, but over time,
when it was time for some intimacy, I'm like, she who refreshes others will herself be refreshed. No, I did.
But that is not what it means for me. I just think I have really learned that what I want for my husband, I want to provide. It just makes a difference. If I want peace, I need to provide peace.
Yeah.
If I want respect, I need to also give respect. Tim says this, but it's so true. It's like I see him as God's son, and he sees me as God's daughter, and how we treat each other is incredibly important. But it's if I want him to be refreshed, because it actually makes my life easier. And there's a level of you know, there's a level of selfishness in it, but what human being doesn't have a level of selfishness in them, you know? So yes, I'm going to do good by him so I can get good done by me. That's
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah. For myself, I think it's 1 Peter 3, and it's husbands, be considerate with your wives so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And the whole concept of, you know, hindering prayers and all that, amen for that. But for me, in our vows that we keep on above our bed, one of the things for me was I had written in there about viewing Sam as God's daughter. And that's a big deal for me because, you know, similar to God not hearing your prayers, you're not considerate with your wife, meaning you're not considerate with his daughter.
Mm.
I know if I had a daughter, I've got sons, but if I had a daughter and some dude was disrespecting my daughter, we're going to have a problem. And similarly, if a woman was disrespecting my son, I'm going to have a problem with her. And those things, I believe, come from God. Those feelings, that
Right.
that rage, that comes from God. And so, like Sam, I literally can. There are 2 times I've raised my voice at Sam in our marriage, and it was 2015, April 2015. We were moving into our house, and she barely even remembered. But anyway, it was just a stressful time, and she wanted something or whatever, and I raised my voice, and she was like, I had never done it before, and then a week later, I had raised my voice at her again, just so she would get comfortable with it.
Terrible.
No, but no, my thing is, and the reason I point that out is that it was something that I felt very strongly about, deeply about with God. That's why there's never been any cussing or name calling, no,
Yeah.
because I'm like, I'm not going to treat God's daughter that way because I don't want him to, it's about me and God. It's not about Sam and I. And I wouldn't treat anybody else that way.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we talk about, anyway, I don't want to get away from the scripture question, but one of the things we do when we help couples get married, we do their premarital coaching, counseling,
Right.
whatever, is in conflict resolution, we say the way you would treat a stranger within the fellowship, that's the floor of how you treat your spouse. And I would never raise my voice to somebody in fellowship or call them a name or something like that. So if I wouldn't do it with them, I'm never going to do that with my wife.
Right.
So anyway.
I love that.
And we did have a rule too, Nori. I know we're in the scripture part, but in that rule, like considering each other and refreshing each other, the one word that we never use and we have never used in our marriage, not to joke about it, we consider the F word, is divorce. We do not, that word is not allowed in our home.
Yeah, same here. I
We
tell him
would
all the
never-
time, the only way he's getting out of this is if he dies. We're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Now we would use the D word death, but we never use divorce.
That's the only way they're getting out. That's why.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even that time that you spoke about, like the 2-year mark for us, it was throughout the 1-year mark for us, where it was.
I was like, what did I do?
But to like, it's kind of like, it was kind of like, to your point, it was like a point that was not spoken, but you spoke about like you and Tim and how like with the love throughout time and how it's grown, and you marked stressful events and like happy events and just all these things. And so the point, like unspoken, is essentially that like in those moments, like you have a choice to either grow together, grow closer, or to grow more distant and unstable. And it's one of the things I like to think of is kind of like a cup. So sure, during the happy times, the beginning, the honeymoon phase, you fill up your cup with love. But then as soon as a stressful event happens, it's kind of like, okay, now the marriage has changed and now it's a bigger cup, and you pour what you had in and it doesn't feel like as much love, and you need to fill it more now because it takes more work to get through this stressful time. But once you fill it, it's going to be amazing. Or you end up not doing that and you just end up possibly pouring it out or leaving it as is, and that cup is getting bigger only with more stressful things. And people look back at it and say, oh, there's never been love in this marriage. And it's like, no, there is. It's just you haven't filled it in a long time through these moments, you know? And we luckily got to a place where I want to say the pivotal changing point was one day we looked at each other and we were like, this sucks. And she was like, yeah, this sucks. And she was like, you want to watch a movie? I said, sure. And we watched the movie together, like just acknowledging, knowing like, yeah, we're not delusional. We both know this is really hard. This is rough.
Yes.
And from there, like it just, we chose to grow together, and we've been best friends, like, you know, like since.
Yeah. I tell people, if I can, I tell people that marriage, in my mind, marriage is either heaven or hell. You got to choose which one it is. It's one or the other, because man, if you are,
there's no purgatory.
No, there's heaven or hell. And you know, because you, like you said, you look around, you're like, yo, this sucks. Like, what is this? And then you have to make a decision like, oh, I'm probably, because we're not doing it the way God designed it. The way God designed it ain't perfect, but man, the alternative. So anyway.
No, I like that. So my next question for you guys is, we have a lot of new people getting married in our church, a lot of new relationships, you know, a lot of new engagements. What would you say is the best advice to give them going into marriage in this new stage of life?
Woo. Oh, I got bullet points. Let's go.
I love it. Do it.
You want to start? You want me to start?
I can start because you probably have more to say.
Dang, she just told me I talk too much.
No, I mean, I think one of the initial things I would say is to plan for a marriage, not a wedding. You know, the wedding's it's one day. The marriage is a lot, you know, that's your lifetime. Right. I do think another important thing I would say is they have to remove the ideal of marriage and understand that they are two very real people who are going to face life together. And marriage isn't a utopia. Yeah. In fact, it gets harder. And I say that in a sense of, I'm an emotional runner. So if I can physically run, I would, but you know, I haven't been able to physically run since I've been married. That's why it was so hard to, you know, leave, but I can emotionally isolate, emotionally run. And so in a marriage, if you're an emotional runner, it can feel like a prison because you can't, you know, if you are committed and you are taking it to till death to us part, you can't go anywhere. Right. So I think for people to honestly take the time to know who they are, how they attach, so that in marriage, they're not turning on each other and, you know, just tearing each other down. Right. It really, doing their inner work before marriage it gives you such an amazing head start. Yeah. So those would be my two pieces of.
Oh, amen. She took my first one, which was, you know, prepare for the marriage. That was the best advice I got before we got married. But it's similar to being baptized. Like if you think the culmination of your faith is your baptism, you got problems. Yeah. It's really the life after. And so marriage is your baptism day. But the things that I would say for people getting married or engaged, a couple of things. One, both of y'all are weird. You just don't know it yet. And I think understanding that the reality is all people are weird. Yeah. And so, and what I mean by that is we're unique. And so when we do counseling for people, I explain, I say, look, you've got to understand you're different, acknowledge you're different. You've got to acknowledge, appreciate that you're different, respect that you're different, and then maybe you'll understand the differences. If you get to a place of understanding, man, God has blessed you in amazing fashion, but it's enough to acknowledge, appreciate, and respect that you're different. And, you know, that will alleviate so many issues. My wife, she talks to her mom a few times a day. For me, I didn't understand that. And I used to judge her about that.
Who else am I going to call and say I found a sale? Or, oh my goodness, this joke. And oh, look what the kid said.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to judge her on that, but now I'm like, oh, amen. That's her. I get it. Like, well, I don't get it, but I get it for her. And
Right.
if she likes it, I love it. And so there's that. The other part is the things that got you to the place that you are able to be married. You will, if you continue to do those things, they will keep you married and doing well. And again, prayer, Bible study, getting input, and the humility to change. And then lastly, to persevere. If you have children, apply that in your marriage at year 1, at year 2, year 5. You apply those things over and over again, and you'll be great.
The only way to have a healthy 20-year marriage is to work on a marriage for 21 years.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, that literally is it. And lastly, actually 2 quick last things. One, of the last 2 is, when you get married, the person you're marrying, you've got to make the decision now that if they never change, that's enough for you.
Yeah.
Because if you marry with the expectation like, oh, they're going to get better.
You marry a project. Don't marry a project.
Don't marry a project. You marry a person. And so
yeah, that's real.
you got to be fine. If they never change, I love this person. And so, and the last one with that is just remember why you got married. If there's a way that you can remember why, it will, and that's your anchor. It'll take you back to the hard times. Sam mentioned it took us a while to have children. And we had a son, then we miscarried. We have had health issues to varying degrees, nothing serious, but we've had health issues. I've lost my parents. Sam has lost someone very close to her. We have got lost jobs, got new jobs. We've lived in 3 different states now. And, we've had money and we've been broke, but here we are. And it's awesome. So that's, I'll end there.
I love that. I like the fact that, because I was going to ask you like how you felt like loss, and we're going to wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask you how like loss, and I know that you had talked about, you lost a child and you had miscarriages. We've actually also had 2 miscarriages. And so I was actually going to ask you like how you guys were able to work through those losses and work through those hard times in order to make sure that you stayed close and that you were emotionally connected. Because I know for me and Jeffrey, like I'm the super emotional one, and he's also emotional, but he'll like push it down and like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. And it's difficult for him to articulate it. And so I go through these big waves of emotions and I'm like, why aren't you feeling this? Like, what are you feeling? So I just that was my last question, was like, how do you guys work through those times?
That's a fantastic question. But I'll start with, for context, both of us battle depression.
So do we.
Okay, we both battle depression, and it manifests itself differently. We're high functioning depressives.
I would say that.
Yeah. And so, I'm trying to think of how we manage. I think we grieve differently. But I would say when we lost our child together, it was so shocking because we found out we were pregnant, and then like literally
we weren't trying.
Same.
Mm-hmm.
And then like literally a few weeks later, we went and did the ultrasound, and they were like, there was no heartbeat. And I think Sam felt that right away, when we were there, she cried, and I internalized it. And I remember I was giving a sister a ride home who was watching our son, and we were driving, and I just started driving fast. And I just, like, it was just coming out in anger. And I was just driving fast and gripping the steering wheel. And so individually, I think Sam, again, we've learned to grieve together. I think probably when my mom died, that was the first time, like, literally we grieved together. We cried together. Normally it's one or the other. Like, Sam is crying and I'm the strong one, or I'm having some kind of meltdown, and and Sam is like, Sam is the strong one. And I think because we don't want to like, we're like, somebody gotta stay strong.
Yeah.
we can't both be out here crazy, or we both can't be out here, falling apart. So we take turns. But I would say I don't know if in that instance we grieved together. We experienced it together. I don't know if we grieved together. I think now we've learned, that was literally 8 years later. God got us to a place where we could actually grieve together. So
yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think being from the West Indies, losing my child, it's kind of, family's like, okay, it'll be fine, you just move on. And so I don't really think I understood the importance of grieving. I actually have grieved. I found myself grieving the loss a lot more. When I lost my aunt in 2020, and that was incredibly painful, but those losses merged for me. And so it was very, very deep. And so the grief lasted a longer time. Losing my mother-in-law, again, he says I talk to my mom 2-3 times a day. I talk to my mother-in-law 2-3 times a day. So I was, she was a second mom to me.
Yeah, my mom. Yeah.
And so I think over time, those losses merged for me. I think Tim is correct. I think with the loss of his mom, we were able to mourn together and really process that together. I think part of it was because it was outside of us, but it affected it. I don't know how to explain it, but that was, I think, the first time where we grieved in a healthy way together.
Right.
I think with the loss of our child, Tim became more cautious. And his grieving process, and I don't think he even realized it was just a lot more cautious. So it created bonding happened later with our third. It definitely happened later for them because there was a cautiousness and a fear the whole time. And then I had more anxiety. So I had an overcompensating. For a third. And so I would say that's how we both process that. It was neither healthy nor it was just what it was for us during that time. And I recognized what was happening. I didn't have the tools, and I don't think I had the environment where, because of the position we were both in, we work in the ministry. I think people just assume that you're okay and you're a very strong Christian and you'll get through it. But I was dying inside and very anxious and afraid. And I think it increased my anxiety even more. And so and again, I think we were just always looking at each other, making sure each other, like Tim is correct, each other is okay.
Right.
And we were both able to fall apart with his mother. But weren't really able to do that because I think there was a need to make sure.
We had a young, our son was 2 years.
2.5, yeah.
He was just 2 at the time, July.
Oh, okay.
He was just 2. And so I think there's part of that, but there's a fantastic question because honestly, I don't know if we even have thought about it.
I've thought about it because I went through therapy recently because of dealing with childhood trauma. And so that's why I was able to really see the progression of how he dealt with how I And it just is, and it does. There's a sadness in it because you realize, whoa, I didn't fully grieve, and there's something that I missed in that. But I'm just grateful that I've had opportunity to process it.
Right.
Through the years, I am much more aware of it now. Much more. I speak it more where I didn't before.
Yeah. And we give each other room. I would say we give each other space to grieve in our ways and to deal with our stuff, even our depression. Like last week was rough. This weekend is rough for Sam. So we give each other space and we understand, like, there's no fixing. There's just
no fixing.
we just need to be together.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the poem called "The Invitation." It's by Orion Mountain Dreamer.
No.
It's an amazing poem, but there's one part of it that says, I don't, she's very, spiritually, all the.
Yeah.
And so she says, I don't care what planet squares your moon. I want to know if you can sit in your pain and not move to fix it. And it just, that line, I got that poem. I learned about it in college, and it is a poem that's always sat with me. And in my moments of grief, honestly, it's a poem I go back to over and over again because it's so meaningful to me.
I love that. Well, that's the end. I'm so grateful that we got to talk with you guys. I could keep going. I have more questions, but I promised you 30 to 45 minutes. So
you can do it if you want to do a bonus section. You have a couple minutes.
If you want to ask another question
or whatever, you can.
No. What I'll do is another time we'll get together. We're going to do this again because I would just keep having more questions.
Yes.
So I could literally do this all day.
Thank you.
But I really appreciate learning from you guys and hearing your story and just hearing your wisdom. I think that everything that you shared is stuff that we can utilize in our marriage, that our listeners can utilize. And I just love learning from you guys and getting to know you even better, because I know we've talked in passing and seen each other and been around each other, but I've never actually got to have a deep conversation with you guys. So I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day. I know you had a long weekend, and I'm just glad that you guys were able to join us.
Yeah.
No, it's been a joy. Thank you for including us.
Yep. Thanks for asking. Yes.
And you've got a great podcast voice. Your husband, I can't speak to, but
thank you.
You know.
He has grown. He is. Let me just say this if I can.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are really, and if you're listening, they really are how they sound. They are joy, and Jeff has just matured. It's amazing to see where he came from.
He's a grown man.
He's grown. Anyway, but we love you. Thank you for having us.
Of course, we love you guys too. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Discovering Me. I hope that you are inspired and spurred on toward a deeper connection with God. If you're looking for a church in the Southern Connecticut area, search Southern Connecticut Church of Christ. And don't forget, tune in next Monday for a new episode. And always remember to faithfully pursue a life of passion.